Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the new Yankee Workshop. Over the years, our research has shown that there are certain pieces of furniture for which there are no antique equivalents. Coffee tables come to mind, or king-size beds. If you want one of those, you have to either buy a new one or build one yourself. So we'll go off to Seekonk, Massachusetts to one of our favorite antique stores for some inspiration, and then come back here and build a king-size Regency headboard. That's next, right here in the new Yankee Workshop. Funded by
So what can I do for you today, Norm?
Well, you know that 4-post canopy bed that you helped us with last time?
Yeah.
That turned out great. This time I'm looking for another bed idea, but instead of a headboard and a footboard with rails, I just want a headboard. We'll slide the mattress up to it.
Give a lot of space in the room.
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
Just a headboard, yeah.
So what's going on here?
Well, this is Mike. He's a French polisher.
Hi, Mike.
Using many coats of shellac through a little linen.
Well, that's something that I really need to learn how to do. Now, how about these guys over here?
They're in the process of bringing back some old antique finishes that go to some headboards that we could take a look at, actually.
So it's a lot of rubbing and wax, it looks like. A lot of work restoring these pieces, huh?
True, yep.
And what's this over here?
Actually, that's one of the headboards for one of the pieces we just looked at on the bench. This is mahogany, and we're planning on doing an upholstered headboard here, but we could have used a solid wood.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Something like that?
A panel, a wall panel headboard. But this is kind of ornate and fancy. What else do you have?
I've got quite a few others. We'll take a look.
Okay. How long have these fellas been with you?
Quite a few years, Norm. In fact, Mike, you might have picked up, he's from England. He's our French polisher, and I have him teaching the boys his French polishing method. We'd like to do more of that here.
Sure, a valuable skill.
Speaking of England, how about that one?
Wow, look at this. All marquetry.
Some burl in there, and I don't even know all those woods. More woods than I'd care to guess.
That's a little beyond us.
I can understand.
How are sleigh beds doing these days?
Sleigh beds are very popular. In fact, right here we have a French one that we've just made in a queen size.
Wow, that is nice. Tiger maple, raised panels, some turn posts on the end with some reading. That's nice. A little bit too complicated.
All right, let me show you some other styles we might have.
Hey, an upholstered headboard. Leather. Wow.
Yeah, people find those comfortable to lean against. This one in leather. Sometimes we use different fabrics the decorators give us. Sort of a very comfortable look, easy to sit and read against. There's some different ones for different poster beds. It's our West Indian headboard with the acanthus carved top. Supposed to bring good luck.
This one here, what style is this?
It's our Empire headboard. We call that just simple molded top with the panels. Nice effect for a big heavy posted bed.
And then a painted one.
Yeah.
Well, I can't paint daffodils like that.
Neither can I, but I do know someone who does, and she does a nice job with it.
And my carving skills are not there yet, but this is getting closer to what I'm looking for.
I've got one other one might translate well for this job.
All right.
Come on this way.
Wow, look at this. You've got beds for the whole regiment here.
Hopefully not the regiment, just hopefully a lot of households looking for good-looking beds, and we made them ahead, ready to finish, so don't be that long a wait, whether it be maple, cherry, mahogany. We'll get them right to the customer.
They're beautiful.
Well, Norm, I was wondering about this bed for your project.
Yeah, I like the feel of this. Mahogany, real nice wood. But we're back to posts again.
Yeah, but if we didn't get hung up on the post, don't think about the posts. I think the headboard's carrying enough of its own. The molding, we're just going a little bit beyond the mattress. Carry it right to the floor. Just simple, clean, no fuss, but very attractive, I think.
Well, now this looks like a queen size. Can I stretch it out to a king?
Very easily. We need to go 10, 11 inches more for a king. Being careful not to lose the proportion. Maybe just add a couple of inches in height, keep that nice curve going.
Good design is all about proportions. And what style would I call this?
Well, we call this a Regency bed, and I would assume we just call that the Regency headboard.
Sounds great. Thanks. Can I take a few measurements?
Yep. Be my guest.
Well, here it is, our version of that Regency headboard. And as you can see, we kept the posts because we figured it wouldn't look right without them. It's a pretty straightforward post, square at the bottom, and it has a slight taper without much detail until we get here, and then it goes up to the top where I've installed these finials. Now, another change that I made from the one we looked at Jeff Jenkins was that I shortened this cap detail. Rather than trying to fit it into the post, I held it back and cut this little scoop. Also, this headboard comes all apart for easy shipping. So if you'd like to build your own version of our king-size Regency headboard, a measured drawing is available with the materials list, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. I want to start by working on the headboard panel. So the first thing I did was make a pattern of the shape of the top of the headboard. It's a half version. And what I'm going to do is take that pattern and lay it on this sheet of plywood, which I've cut to the right length, line it up, and trace the outline. Once I've traced this side, I'll just flip the pattern over and do the other side. Now, this is a piece of high-quality mahogany plywood, especially selected for its beauty. Before we use any power tools, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Now the idea is to true up the edge, and I'm using this portable oscillating spindle sander, which is handy. But if you don't have one of these, a block of wood wrapped in some 80 grit and a little bit of patience is all you need. Now I made a little gauge block to lay out the bottom of the top rail. I just set it up against the area I've already cut and just keep it in contact as I trace it out. Let's take a look at the prototype. One of the critical joints is between this top rail and this side stile. It has to be square. So while I'm doing the layout, I'm squaring off the end of the panel and drawing a line that goes a little bit further than the width of that stile. I'll cut the curve with the jigsaw. I'll make this straight cut at the miter box later. All right, that takes care of this piece. Now let's work on the panel. It's actually recessed. It's again a piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and if you look on the back, you can see how it projects out. To get that panel, I can use the remaining material that I have from the sheet. I don't have to cut the curve again. I've laid out how much I want to trim off each end, and I've calculated how much I have to rip off. While I'm ripping, I'll make an adjustment to 6 inches and cut the lower rail. To trim the headboard panel, I'm going to use my homemade panel cutter. Well, that takes care of all the pieces for the headboard at this stage. Now we have to join them together. Where the stiles meet the rails, I'm going to use a mortise and tenon joint. I'm going to cut a groove in all 4 pieces, slightly offset to the back. I'm going to form tenons on the stiles, and they'll get glued together. Now to make the groove, which is what I want to do first, I'm going to use my router with this slot cutting bit. Now normally I make those grooves on the table saw, and that's fine for straight pieces, but you can't make a groove in the curved piece on the table saw. Now I'm beginning to form the tenons on those stiles, and I'm not bothering with the dado, I'm just nibbling it away with my saw blade. Now after dropping the blade a bit, I can complete each. All right, let's set this aside and start working on the panel, which is going to sit in here. The panel needs a rabbet all the way around so that it can fit into the groove. It recesses it. To make the rabbet, I'm going to use my rabbeting bit on the router. I'll go all around the panel. I'll do it in 2 passes. Okay, now I'm ready for a little assembly. Putting glue on the mortise and tenon joints. And you'll note that I'm using this brown glue. It's the same as the yellow glue, just made for dark wood applications. Now I know what you're saying. You're never supposed to glue a panel to a frame. But since it's all made out of plywood, I don't have to worry about the expansion and contraction issues. All right. Let's see if we can get all the pieces to slip together. Okay, that looks good. We'll just let this sit for a while. Well, let's take another look at the prototype. I want to start working on these posts. They're made up of 3 parts. There's a lower section that has a mortise in it, an upper section with a tenon, and of course the finial. Now I need to put a slot in the lower portion of the post to receive the headboard. That would be impossible to do after the turning was done. I also want to put a mortise to receive this rail. Both of those are made at the router table. I've installed a straight cutting bit in my router table that matches the thickness of the plywood. Now here's one of the blanks. I've laid out a mortise for the rail and for the headboard, and I've transferred a little mark over to the side. The idea is that I want to drop down on the mark that's in front of the bit, move till I reach the mark that's behind the bit, and remove the piece. And do the same thing for the headboard. Now it's going to take 3 passes to get to the depth that I want. Here, I've taken the table of my bandsaw and tipped it to 45 degrees. I've set up a straight edge clamp as a fence, and the idea is that I want to clip the corners on this post just shy of where it gets square, and that'll save me time later at the lathe. Okay, now there's one more thing I want to do before I head over to the lathe, and that's to insert a piece of poplar, in this case scrap wood, into this mortise. So I don't want tear out to occur on the edge as I'm doing the turning. And I want to make sure I fasten it with a screw so that it can't come out of there. All right, with the first piece mounted in the lathe, I've checked it for balance and it seems okay. I want to show you what I did first when it came to these turnings. I made a full-scale layout of each post with all the details and measurements. By having a full-scale drawing, I can simply take my calipers to the drawing and check the dimensions as I turn the piece rather than using a ruler. Now the first thing to do before I can make any details is to make the post round. And to do that, I'm going to start out with my roughing gouge. Now I'm ready to start working on the transition between square to round. And I'm going to use this skew chisel to make that first cut. Now here I'm just making a little bit of a bead at the top of the post, and this will hide the joint when we join the 2 pieces together. One of the things that's really nice to do and quick is to sand the piece on the lathe. All right, there's another lower part of a post. Now the upper section, because it's turned over its entire length, I'll clip all the corners at the table saw. All right, here's the top of our post, and after sanding it out, here's what it looks like. Later, we'll drill a hole to receive the tenon in the lower post. Now let's turn a couple finials. All right, here's a blank for the finials with the corners knocked off. And I'm actually going to make 1 finial on each end. You can really see the shape now. Well, after some final turning and finish sanding, we have a complete finial. Now the post turning is complete. There's one more thing I want to do before I leave tonight. That little cutout represents the drop that I made in the top of the headboard. Now I have to cover the plywood edge with some veneer. I've ripped a couple thin strips of mahogany veneer, and we're going to use contact cement. I put it on let it dry until it's tacky, and then adhere it. And of course, with contact cement, you have to do both sides of the joint. All right, now the idea is I want to start right at this edge, leaving the excess hang over each side. Take my J-roller and just roll it along, making sure there's no gaps. All right, that's good. We'll let it cook overnight, and we'll finish this project tomorrow. Oh, good morning. I'm getting started today making some moldings that we're going to need for the headboard. I've taken a piece of 5/16" stock and using a rounding over bit, rounded over each edge. And that's going to become this little quarter round right near the panel. Now I'll rip a piece out of each side of the stock. When I built the prototype, that little 5/16" molding snapped on me. And in the past, I've found that if I soak them in warm water, that seems to do the trick. Let these cook for a while. Well, now would be a good time to trim up that veneer I applied yesterday. I'll knock it down close to the plywood with my plane and sand it even. Well, now I'm ready to start applying some of the molding, and I'm going to start with this top piece. It's actually 2 layers of mahogany, each one about 3/16 of an inch thick. I'm going to put the first one on by gluing it, both the plywood and the wood, and I'll start in the middle and clamp it as I bend it around the shape. Here's the second piece of that build-up. I put some glue on the inside where it meets the other one and carefully push it through and clamp the two together using some spring clamps. Well, while this sets up, let's go back to the posts. I need a mortise in that lower post to receive the tenon from the top one. So what I've done is set up the drill press with a 1 1/4 inch Forstner bit. I've gone straight down from the bit down to the base and built a little platform so that the post won't spin as I drill it. So I'm just going to hold a piece of wood against the post in this direction so it won't move and drill a hole 3 inches deep. I want to drill a hole for this bed bolt, which goes through the post into a nut embedded in this rail. It's what holds the post to the rail and the headboard. First, we'll drill the counter bore, 1 inch in diameter, 1 1/4 inch deep. Now I've switched to a 7/16" brad point bit to drill the through hole. I have another little job to do. When I slide the tenon into the hole, it sticks proud at the bottom of this mortise. I want to remove that material, otherwise the headboard won't seat correctly. All right, now it's time to glue the posts together. So a little bit of glue in this mortise and some on that tenon. That should do it. All right, I think that has set long enough. We'll remove all these clamps and finish the molding on our headboard. I have to add another piece to this top of the headboard just to fill in the gap. All right, now I'm ready for the first piece that goes around the inside area of the panel. A little more of that brown glue, and I'll tack it with some pins. Now the molding has a little bit of a rabbet on the inside edge there. And I'll show you how I made that. It starts out as a piece of 3/16 inch thick stock, about 1.5 inches wide. I've set the saw blade so it's just barely above the table and 1/8 of an inch away from the fence. I'm going to run the piece through, turn it around, run the other edge, then I'll move the fence 2 more times to make the rabbet. Now that 5/16 quarter round that I made earlier, glued and pinned in place. Now here's the piece that I soaked in my water bath, and let's see if we can bend it to the shape and secure it without breaking it. The last piece of molding is this 1/2-inch quarter round that sits under the cap. If I took a piece and tried to soak it, it would not bend. So what I'm going to do is take this piece of 1/2-inch, which I've rounded the edges over, take a piece off of this side, take a chunk out of here. That'll give me 2 thin pieces that I can bend, and when they're joined together, they'll look like one. Here's the first piece, and here's the second piece. It looks like one, and they'll be a lot easier to bend. I'll let that first piece set for a while in those clamps, and we'll start working on this rail which connects the posts. I want to form a tenon on each end of the rail. It looks like this. It'll fit into the mortise. Here's my stock. I've set up my dado and my sacrificial fence. A pass on each face will form the sides. All right, I raised the blade slightly more than a 1/2-inch to make a cut to form the top and bottom of each tenon. Now I need to make a mortise for this nut for the bed bolt. I've got this straight edge as a guide and a 3/8-inch spiral cutting bit. And we'll square it up with a chisel. Now here's a jig that I made up so I could drill a nice straight hole for the bolt. A piece of wood at the end is the same size as the rail, and the plywood locates it. I'm going to use a 1/2-inch bit, drill a hole that intersects with that mortise. All right, now I'm going to take the nut and drive it down into the mortise and then thread the bolt into it to make sure it's located properly before I plug up that hole. Tap in a plug, and then we'll trim it flush. To eliminate those sharp edges, a 1/4-inch radius round over. And now we can jump back to the headboard and put the second half of this molding on. All right, this is the last little piece, this return that finishes off the cap. With this in place, ready to do some final sanding, and think about how we're going to do the finish for this. For the finish on our Regency headboard, we're going to start with some stain. This is red mahogany. I'm going to put a nice even coat on the whole piece, and when that dries, then we'll get some filler. Mahogany has a lot of pores, so we want to put some filler to fill up those pores, and once that's dry, we'll seal everything with a couple coats of satin polyurethane. Well, here it is, our Regency headboard with several coats of wipe-on poly, which has really brought out the richness of this mahogany. So if you don't have room for a 4-poster bed, how about 2 posts and a headboard? This was a fun project to build. Let me show you what we're going to build next time. We call it a painted corner hutch. We found an antique in a nice little antique shop on the island of Nantucket, and we love the size, so we decided to build our version. And here it is. I hope that you'll join us next time and build one along with us right here in the New Yankee.